How was your morning session? Good? Hope you all had coffee as well after lunch as well. So I'm super excited to talk about Power Apps, Flow, and CDS this afternoon. This is the first time I'm actually presenting this, even though my team helps with all of the changes in the marketing website. If you go to powerapps.com, flow.microsoft.com, the marketing website, as well as community, my team helps with this. But the first time I'm actually presenting externally as a presentation. I've done one-on-one sessions with customers, but first time broadly. How many of you are using Power Apps, Flow, or CDS? No one. A little bit, OK. Implementing. Can you talk about what you're implementing, how you're using? Just curious.
Actually, we started with UC at the moment. Has 6 use cases.
OK.
We started with CRM and Dynamics.
OK. And how about you? Someone else mentioned, yeah.
We're trying to in Flow to design a workflow for invoice processing.
Invoice processing, OK.
So once it comes in and get approval.
Approval, OK. Yeah, so those are some of the examples. I'll walk through, give a little bit of overview about what these services are. Most people may not have heard about it. I think even in the audience, they've not. How many of you have heard about it? I know these are two people you've heard. OK, quite a lot of you have heard about it. OK. So there are quite a lot of business problems overall in the world, right? So in terms of various business problems which are there, and only some off-the-shelf components can be solved only by some of the business problems can be solved by off-the-shelf components, right? So these are applications that are built, which are, if it is common across multiple people, then essentially can be done. But there are a lot of other, if you look at a particular enterprise organization, there are a lot of business processes and problems which need to be solved specific to a specific company, right? Then you get into a lot more in terms of the customization. It's a custom-built app. It's not only custom-built app, but you have to maintain it. How much cost it is for maintenance. That's significant cost in terms of even for a smaller company, it's significant cost for maintaining it. And then not only maintaining it, but also upgrading as the need comes up. And getting a set of developers to code and maintain this is a significant challenge. You need to have the overall developer skills to actually do this as well. So there are a lot of areas where it's completely uncovered, where you are lacking certain areas, where you don't have applications to overall get productivity to all of the users in your organization because of lack of capability of developers or off-the-shelf components to actually go and solve this. Now, either you're not looking at it as a company in terms of overall going through a digital transformation and making it operationalized much more effective because it's super expensive. I don't want to do the investment on this because I don't know the real return on investment, how much it's going to be. So a lot of areas which are like that. Now, one of the things we are looking at was how can we bring this in terms of making productivity much more easier so that you can build these apps which are enterprise grade and it can automatically work on various devices. Because once you're building an app, now you need to have it on mobile and tablet, on desktop. How can you actually prepare these apps and you don't have to custom code each and every area, right? So that was one of the key problems which Power Apps is trying to tackle. So if you look at some of the examples in terms of, these are some of the examples in terms of operationalizing and making apps. So for example, here, I think this is wind turbine in terms of are these working fine overall? How do you go about maintaining these overall? So that's one of the scenarios. And then in terms of shipping, this is here in terms of wind turbines and some of these, if some parts fail, do I need to actually go and call a specific person to go and repair it? Does it have to be repaired immediately, or can it wait a little bit longer? There's also cost associated with it if it's a weekend and everything. So all of these, a lot of these is manual right now in several of these companies. I'm going to start with some customer examples of how they are actually using Power Apps right now, so that hopefully that'll give you a little bit of better understanding rather than me diving into the actual product, because we've been working with several set of customers in the early stages of Power Apps, and then working with them to actually enable this. Okay. So the first example here is essentially repairing wind turbines. So in this particular case, essentially this is one of the companies whom we're working with, TransAlta. So if there is a set of metrics that are getting monitored on all of these turbines. Now, based on this set of metrics, there is data getting collected. Now, a person has to be able to go and decide whether do I need to call a repair engineer immediately or can it wait, right? So a lot of calculation that need to be done. Now, how do you go about doing all of these calculations, analyzing this data, and then making this calling? It was super complicated in terms of how they were handling this, right? So in some cases, they might probably are calling the service technicians much more earlier, and it's actually costing them more money. So what was done was essentially an app was created using Power Apps, getting all of the data, creating a set of workflows which makes it easier for the people who are actually making these decisions, much more easier in terms of doing all of the calculations, making all of the calculations, which involved a little bit more additional higher end in terms of coding, but like simple enough for whom we call as power users, right? So when we call as power users, we're thinking about users who are actually being able to use in the context of Excel, if you're in terms of pivot tables and Excel functions, and then being able to do this, like that's whom we target as power users, who can actually do some kind of data analysis and then being able to do it. They're capable of writing functions. So that's where they're preparing these. They prepared this app specifically to go and look at if there is report coming out in terms of these data. Now, do I need to call the technician or can it wait? Right. So this is one example. The second one is it's in a company called IPS, where it's essentially servicing a set of motors, large motor that are coming up, and their process was completely manual. So when a motor comes in, they essentially need to take apart the motor to find out what the problem is. The motor is not working. And when I say motors, some of them are really, really large. So when they actually disassemble the motor, they have to take manually, they have to take pictures, what are the various parts, and how is it being done. So all of this was completely manual, right? And maintaining the records, if something gets lost, is a significant challenge. So I think one of the partners, I don't recall the partner name, Confluent is a partner name. So they actually prepared Power Apps application for them. So it's a Power Apps application which was built in, getting all of the parts of the motor, being able to analyze all of the things, and then it was also created as a tablet app where it was very, very easy for the technicians, as and when they were disassembling the motors, they can actually take pictures. So before, the early process was, this story doesn't, the picture in this doesn't tell the story. They actually did a presentation to our team where they were physically taking manual notes as well as taking pictures in a camera, and then trying to stitch together all of this and maintaining it as a record, right? So thinking of taking pictures and then printing it out and also entering each of these components is a super complicated process, manual process. So this improved significantly in terms of the productivity. They were able to very easily, with the app just created, very easily prepare the app, takes pictures immediately, and then this improved the productivity overall very much for them. And then within Microsoft, we actually created a set of apps. Essentially, there are various teams within Microsoft where we've created the apps. One of the teams we closely worked with the HR team, the human resources team. So for example, if you're looking at logging the vacation and everything, it was essentially for people, I think, other than me and like anyone else in Microsoft here in the room, only two of us, I think, right? So here we have to go to a separate application and go and log. And even just going and doing this and they maintaining the application, because for each of the countries and everything is super challenging for the HR. So the HR team actually said, okay, this is much more easier for them. So just working and training them a little bit in terms of Power Apps in the early stages. And then we have an vacation app, so they essentially calculate all of the things in terms of how much time. It's very, very easy to do. Now, it's an app that's been created. It can run on desktop or mobile. It gets authenticated based on the user who's coming in. It goes and queries the data depending on the user. It's extremely simple, right? Okay. This is the fourth example of a customer. How many of you have heard, anyone ever heard about Drivetime? Okay, so this is a customer who actually, essentially, what they do is they go for car auctions. So they actually buy the cars from rows and rows of cars in terms of an auction. They go and buy a car. So they send actual evaluators for each of the cars. The evaluators go by row, and each of the rows, each of the cars, they already know what are the cars there. They actually go and evaluate, okay, these are the problems in the car. They take the picture immediately. This is the estimate to fix the car. And they put all of these estimates immediately, and then they make a recommendation whether they can actually bid on the car or not bid on the car. Up to what point should they bid on the car? So then the company actually, based on this, they actually make the bid, and whether if they make the bid and if they get the car, they actually go and repair the car and sell it. Okay, so this is a company which is actually specializing in going into auctions of used cars primarily, and going and buying these, making the repairs, and then selling them. Now, are they making profit? And making this app was actually done by a person who was a data person. They didn't have like specialized developers. This person was familiar with data and Power BI. Essentially, he spent some amount of time in his free time, looked at Power Apps, actually coded this in Power Apps, and launched this for a set of users. So this was made their life significantly simple overall. Right? So these are customer examples in terms of how they were using overall. Okay? So if you look at Power Apps, it's essentially is a service for creating a set of apps. It's actually being able to connect to various different sources, creating a set of apps. Essentially, you have a studio. When I say studio, you have a desktop app, which actually you can create the app, or you also can create it on the web. Right? So on the web browser also you can create. You have both of them. Depending on what your usage is, very similar to Power BI Desktop, having for authoring the reports, you can actually author the app directly in a studio or on the website. And then once you author this, you publish it directly in your organization. You give the permissions, who can access it, and then each of the users, depending on the permission, they can actually access the app directly in mobile or on the web. Okay? Any questions so far in terms of Power Apps so far? Yes?
How is the integration with Dynamics 365?
The question was integration with Dynamics 365. We have a set of connectors. I don't know whether we have the connector with respect to Dynamics 365. We can take a look in terms of when we get into the connectors section. So I'll try to take a look. I don't know on the top of my head in terms of immediate connection to Dynamics 365. In terms of for Dynamics 365 as a broadly, yes, because when you go into Dynamics 365 and actually you are preparing the data gets stored underneath the covers. It gets stored something called as common data service. Okay, so from that automatically you will be able to author, because of the common data service and connectivity to common data service, you can actually use it. If it is Dynamics on-prem, that's where I don't know to what areas where you can connect. If it's Dynamics 365, then all of the data which you're putting into Dynamics 365, underneath the covers it gets into CDS, common data service, and then from that you can definitely create all of the apps. Yes? So what coverage? Wireless permanently, because you are connecting to some data, right, and interacting with some data, and also you're publishing this as an app and into the service, so you do need network connectivity. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So first and foremost, essentially you are connecting to systems you are already using or create your own data. So essentially what this essentially means is you're trying to create an app, and you're creating an app based on data that already exists. So it could be any of the data in terms of Dynamics 365 or Office 365. You can connect to the data which you already use, and then you can build the app on top of it. So if you take an example of HR, so they already have the system in terms of what are the vacation hours for each of the people, and you can actually connect to that system automatically. Or it could be an app for entering new data for your because you're creating a new app for your business and where people are going to enter the data, then that in that particular case, you can actually create that all of the data going into common data service as a platform, or it could go into any of the other locations, but like we would recommend going into common data service because you can then integrate this data which you're collecting along with the other business data so that you can build additional richer apps. Okay? And then build useful apps without writing code. So this is a key factor in terms of you don't have to write specific code for specific devices. You're building, writing the app or creating the app once, and once it's deployed, your end users will essentially download Power Apps directly from the store, in any of the stores. Once they log in into Power Apps, they will see the list of apps which they have access to, and then they can open up the apps and use it. Okay? And then, publish the app instantly. It says after building the app, you're publishing the app so that your end users can use it. Okay. Yes.
If, I mean, I'm working with an Apple iPhone, and how do I publish the app for an iPhone?
Correct. So you publish the app essentially in your company. You publish the app in Power Apps, right, and give permissions. So for example, you have a security group. You give permissions to the security group, and all the users in the security group can actually access it. On the iPhone, we have the Power Apps app on the iPhone, which is already available. That gets certified, that gets published. So when the user, your end users or business users will actually download the Power Apps app and install it on iPhone. And then when they launch the Power Apps app, then they will see the list of apps they have access. Okay?
App in app.
App in app, you can think about it that way. Yes. So this was related to the question here. So this is one of the diagram. It's too much of an architectural diagram. I don't know how much. I'm going to spend as little time as possible here. So we call this tier as Power Tier in terms of Power BI, Power Apps, and Microsoft Flow. This is essentially what we have seen is a lot of customers actually using these services together, right? In terms of analyzing the data, first analyzing the data, and then if they need to take actions, they're actually essentially creating applications where their business users can take action. And then if they want to automate the entire workflow, that's when they're using Microsoft Flow. So this is what we are calling as Power Tier. And all of the data, it's essentially where if you look at the data is actually coming from Dynamics or Office 365. And all of this, when you're having the data in Office 365, this is essentially going into what we call as common data service. And once it's in common data service, then it can be consumed by Power BI or Power Apps. So here we call this as Pro Tier. This is essentially for more of professional developers, or in this particular case, it's BI developers. Your Pro Dev and Pro Integration. These are what we call as Pro Tier, a little bit more advanced developers who can actually do additional content. So here, this is more in terms of power users is what we are targeting in terms of the overall here in terms of Power BI, Power Apps, and Flow. And obviously, connectors and gateways are an important piece in terms of I'm able to connect to this particular data source or the other data source. And if you have gateways, if you want to have on-prem data access, then you need the gateway to be installed. Okay. So if you look at overall in terms of business apps driven by analysts and power users, so here you have on one spectrum in terms of x-axis you have like professional developers and then citizen developers. On the other area you have external and internal apps. So here in terms of complexity and customization, what we are looking at is citizen developers and more of internal apps. Somewhere in terms of external apps, we're primarily targeting this section in terms of Power BI, Power Apps, and Flow. What we are calling as more in terms of power users, where they are skilled enough in such a way that like they're a little bit more advanced than normal users, but they can actually develop in terms of some of the applications with simple calculations and Excel-like functions, and they can actually create these apps and publish them. Okay, and as you go into much more professional, external-facing things in terms of websites and apps, then essentially you're getting into this particular space. So I'll do a quick demo of what Power Apps looks like. And before I do the demo, I had a quick question. In your companies, how do you go and order new devices? Like if you want to get a new computer. Email, okay. So how do you decide on which machine to use? You can buy any machine, your company will approve?
Well, for Antilogics, yes, you can basically, as long as it's more or less reasonable.
Reasonable.
Of course, we're 44 people, so it's
Okay.
easy.
Any other answers? How do you go and order machines? Your laptops or desktops? How do you go and order right now? Anyone?
They don't own a computer, that's probably
So let me quickly show within Microsoft. You know how do you order within Microsoft for your?
You ask your peer which one to order, and then you report when you order.
Okay. So within Microsoft, there are a pre-approved set of devices in terms of what people can order. Obviously, go and consult with your peer to find out what they like and everything. But essentially, there is an internal site which gives you the list of devices you can go and order, right? You can go and look at the specs and everything. Obviously, this is a site that gets maintained periodically in terms of like updating all of the content and everything. So it's definitely in terms of cost of building this and maintaining it is expensive as well. So now, what I have here is I'm logged in. Oh, sorry, my fault. Yeah. People were looking at like what's happening.
Power apps, I like it.
So sorry, this was the site I was showing initially in terms of list of devices. You can go and select and find out what are the costs, etc. Overall, right? So now, in order for the demo, I've created a SharePoint list. So one of the key scenarios where we're targeting is there are a lot of people who have content and data in SharePoint, and then being able to manage and create apps. They are doing a lot of customizations right now. How can you deliver this as simple Power Apps solutions for the power users? Right. So here I have a SharePoint list which has a list of devices, what are the price, link to the images, etc. So you have Power Apps included as part of Office 365 plan, so all of the users can actually use it. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a Power App here, create an app here. So I think trying to create it. Having some SharePoint issue. All right, so I'm going to move back. I'll see if this gets resolved in a couple of minutes. I'll continue with the presentation and then see if I can continue with the demo as part of Flow. So the demo I was trying to go through was essentially, I have a SharePoint list, and what I'm doing is trying to create a Power App application there. It automatically recognizes the list of fields, and it launches Power Apps. It tries to decipher what are the various things which the user would want to present, depending on the list of things. And it'll create a canonical 3-screen app, where the first screen gives you an overview, second screen in terms of I can go and get the list of details, and then the third screen is for if you want to enter data and edit data and then push the data up and update it. Right? So this is a canonical 3-screen app which we typically create in Power Apps. And you can wire up, and what I wanted to show was how easy it is to make very simple modifications to create this app of just looking at just the devices, and then I want to be able to go and see the details of the devices, right? And then the next step, as part of Flow, I want to create, I think one of them mentioned in terms of order, invoice, and processing. I want to create just an order of creating this, selecting a specific device, and then creating a flow so that that will automatically trigger and send an email to my admin, because we actually take screenshots of the image and send an email to the admin, and okay, please go and order this device, right? That's what I was trying to author. So let's see whether the SharePoint issue gets resolved next. So we'll go through this. So in terms of packaging, so this is about Power Apps. So for extending Dynamics and Office 365, so you have Power Apps and Microsoft Flow included as part of both Dynamics 365 and Office 365, so that you can actually get this included. And then for business users, you have Power Apps Plan 1, and for IT and admins, Plan 2. So plan 2 is primarily for people who are actually going to be creating the apps, because we expect the power users, a very small number of power users, and then you have a large number of users who want to use it, right? So for the users who are using it, they need Power Apps Plan 1, and for the people who are actually creating and administrators, you need Power Apps Plan 2. Okay? So this is more in terms of, I think there are questions about licensing, and how do I go and purchase, what are the common things which we need to do. So that's why this is trying to tackle this here. So getting into Microsoft Flow, so here you have a list of things which are common tasks which are there. And there are significant automation challenges, because each of these tasks in the real business world, in terms of a set of tasks you want to automate, so that you don't have to do this manually, right? As humans, you have a list of things that are coming up. We are able to keep track to some extent, and then being able to keep track and go through this. But as and when things are growing, as data is growing, you want to be able to automate as much as possible. So that's where Flow comes into picture and tries to help you out. So there are a lot of manual tasks which you do in terms of sending an email or tracking an email. If one of your clients is actually giving you a document, now I want to get notified appropriately. And if there are a lot of customers and clients, now how do you go about actually understanding each of the clients and then being able to, who are the top most important clients? I can create as a flow and say that if this particular client contacts me, please text me, right? Or provide an SMS because they are more important customer, so that I want to be able to handle that immediately or interact with them immediately, right, if there is a customer question. So this is where a lot of the manual tasks, being able to automate this is where Flow comes into picture. So it helps for non-developers. So it's not primarily targeted for non-developers. As business users, you can actually go and set up the flow. And there are various types of flow which you can set up, so that you can automate things which are commonly there to improve your overall productivity. So that's where Flow comes into picture. In terms of some of the examples are, I want to get notifications, right? So I want to get notifications as and when some things happen, I want to get notified, so then I can get this information. Then synchronizing of the files. So there might be files which you are actually saving onto your desktop. I want to get automatically synchronized onto my mobile device or other device. Then Flow helps you in terms of automating that. And then if you want to collect a set of data or automate the approvals, I think this was the example they were talking about, automating the approvals. So this is essentially, instead of manually going through each of the steps, you can automate the entire approval process. So these are examples of how you can leverage Flow. Okay? So there are various templates that are available. So if you look at Flow, and if you go to flow.microsoft.com and sign up for Flow and then start using it, you have a lot of templates which are there. So these are what we have seen as common templates which customers are using. So you can actually leverage these common templates. You don't have to create your own flow. So the flow is essentially going to be a sequence of tasks which you're stitching together, right? If I have an incoming email, I can look at the email, look at the subject line, look at the user. I want to be able to parse each of the information. At the next step, I want to be able to send a text message to me or copy my manager. So these are list of tasks which you're doing as part of notification process. So there are common, what we have seen is common templates. And we've created these common templates and made it available so that you can actually use the common templates, wire up to your appropriate data sources, and then start leveraging it immediately. So this will help improve productivity for you so that you don't have to manually do all of these. And you can customize as needed as well. Okay. So these are some of the common things in terms of making up a flow. First is a notification flow. So this is essentially to notify an event occurred. So I want to be able to get notification if an event occurred, right? So I have, so for example, we're going through a vendor approval process for at the beginning of every fiscal year in terms of going and renewing the contracts and everything, right? So it has part of it, there are multiple processes in terms of who needs to approve the vendor approval process. So going through that and automating and notifying, saying that, okay, this particular person approved it, now it's in the next person's chain, who at what stage. I definitely go into my overall purchase order and see exactly what state it is in, but getting a notification helps me to immediately keep in touch with that. The second one is trigger. This is an event that kicks off of the flow. If this happens, then kick off a flow event so that gets information. And then actions, what the flow does is use the data from the trigger. So this is action, what action to take. Whenever this happens, then what action to take. Okay? And obviously there are very, very complex scenarios which you can automate using Microsoft Flow. This is complex scenarios in the sense of I want to be able to look at Twitter, I want to be able to find out all the users and then send an email or send information into my Salesforce account. There are a lot of complex scenarios which you can do. It's primarily targeted for making productivity much more simpler and easier so that you can automate things. It can be for very simple scenarios as well as it can go as complex scenarios as well. And it's essentially for integrating all the systems which you're already using. So these are all the various systems which you, as an organization, are probably already using it, and being able to integrate it in the existing system so that you can actually get much more productivity out of that overall. Okay, let's see whether the issue is resolved, and I can do both the demos together. So. Okay, so actually it created, and it just took longer time, I think. So here, what I did was from this place, I created a new app, and then it essentially landed me into what you're seeing is the Power Apps creation on the web version of it. So these are the 3 screens which you see here. So the screens are, first is browse container, then details, and then like editing the content, right? So this is what we call as a 3-screen canonical app. So here now, if I go into browse gallery, it's gone and detected a set of things. These are the Azure in terms of all-in-one. This is what it's detected. I'm going to go and change the layout. So it's as simple as going and changing the layout. I want to see the layout as like a 4. Visually, this is what I'm seeing here. So right now it's going and populating because these are URL images. It's as simple as I can create this app and go and create this. And I don't want to get the device number, but I'm going to go and change this to price so that I can see the price here. And it's as simple. I can see the model, and then I'm changing the price here. So I'm here. I'm seeing the price. I want to be able to do this as concatenated with the dollar symbol. This was missing before. It's very, very similar to writing functions in Excel, right? So once I do this, should be able to see the dollar symbol here. And I'm going to say, let's change this as approved devices. And one more thing I want to, by default, I had a search box here. So when I go into this browse gallery, so it created, these are all the things in terms of what the device name and everything. So here it included the device number in the search box by default. I'm going to change this device number into what I have as a manufacturer. Manufacturer as a column here. And I want people to go and simply select on the manufacturer. I'm going to change this also MFR, which is the manufacturer here. So now I've done some level of customization in the default screen. Now when I run this app, I can actually go and say, okay, these are all the various approved devices. If I want to go and filter on Dell, this is the experience what the users will see, right? So when they open up, when you publish this app and then actually give permissions to your end users, they're going to go and see this one in terms of Dell. I want to be able to go and, so for example, if I want to go and see Asus, these are various approved devices. They immediately they can actually go and see this. I'm going to go back here, and now once this is done, now there is a second screen in terms of the detailed content, right? So first, once I have this, I can actually do on selection. So for on a specific selection of this, on selection, I can actually go and change this exactly. When I select this device, I want to go into this next screen. Right? So here I can actually go and do an action here. Select this, and I can say I want to be able to navigate to the next screen. Once I see this, I have the default screen view. This is the default content view here. So this is the second view in terms of, I'm going to change this, device details. If I go into this form here, I can see the list of forms, what is being selected here. And here, here I can say I don't want the device name, and I can easily say that like I don't want the manufacturer. I don't need the OEM ID, and The photo is a URL. I can actually drag and drop to the top, right? So these are things which I can actually very easily drag and drop and change all of these. And now when the user is actually clicking on this, I also want to set up, I'm going to insert a button here. So this is for ordering this. So I've set up a button here, and as part of it, let's say, initiate order, and then as part of that action, I want to, whenever a user is actually looking at all of the details and then they want to initiate an order, I want to create a flow, right? So this is what I'm stitching up in terms of I'm creating an app where the end users are going to use the app to browse through a list of devices. They click on a specific device, they get into the next screen, they can see more details about the device in terms of what is their memory and RAM. If they like it, they will initiate an order. And here, while they're initiating an order, then I can create a new flow here. So this is essentially going into Microsoft Flow, and I can go and create a new flow. So here I'm going to create a new step here and add an action here. And this is essentially going to send an email. Right? So whenever a button is clicked, it's automatically creating a new flow and sending an email to my admin. I'm going to put myself as the person who's going to approve, getting an email. So here I can put the email address, and then here in the subject line, please order. And then here I can put in Ask and Power Apps. This essentially, what it does is I can pass parameters from Power Apps to Flow, which will actually give you, okay, what is the device that was selected, what was the price. I can actually select all of these here, right? I can put in, as part of this, I'm going to put another parameter here in terms of the body, and another parameter coming here. And then I'm going to give a name for this. And then create a flow. So this has created a flow. Now I'm going to come back here. So now order device email. So this is the flow which I'm stitching it together. So it's adding this for this particular button, initiate order. I'm selected this. It's adding this this flow. And then here I need to select what are the things in terms of what I'm going to be leveraging and passing as parameter. So here I can say browse gallery 1 dot selected. This is a device that has been selected here, and then the model number, and then I can also say I think I have 3 parameters I need to double check. I think it's probably asking for one more parameter, I think. All right. 4 parameters, I think I've, hold on. So selected too many parameters to include this.
Right, browse in the settings. There is a risk that they can browse.
Oh, and this one?
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. So let me put the name here. Yeah. Now it's now when I'm going to bring this in side by side. And here I can actually go and run this, right? When I run this application and then I click initiate order, this will automatically trigger the flow here. I think I need to edit, and I have multiple flows created. So this will, so let me go back into the application. So here, this is the actual application which the user is coming and doing it. So here they click on this particular screen. It automatically takes them to the next one, and then they can initiate this order. That will automatically trigger the email back to the my admin. And so I'm going to close this. So once you prepare this, I can go and actually save this app. And then I can go and share this app to multiple users in my company, right? So that as simple as going and creating this app from the data which you have, do a few customizations completely with very similar to Excel-like functions, and then being able to create this. Okay. I'm going to switch back to the presentation. And finally, I want to show one last. Let me finish up common data servers and then come back. So common data servers, which is essentially for data everywhere and apps everywhere. So this is essentially common data service is a service which we have created, which is primarily for what we have created this for is you have a lot of data which is coming in for your company data. And essentially what it's trying to do is centralize all of the data into one common location. Right? So that all your data, company data, is stored in this one common location called common data service. And by storing this, you can create a common data service understands some of the schemas and data natively, so that you can create apps and extend the apps for the business users much more seamlessly and very easily. So I have a few slides on this. I might have to run quickly because of the time, and I wanted to show one last things. So you have various data in your organization coming from HR, finance, travel, self-service. All of this, it's a complex web of data, and there are some joins. Now, each of the business users, they may not be aware of all of the joins which are there for each and every data that's coming in from various subsystems. Now, once all of this data is essentially centralized into common data service, then the business users can actually do self-service, directly connect to common data service, build the business apps, or build using Power BI, build reports. It makes it much more easier. So this is essentially to simplify so that all your data, all your business data is one single location, so that all of the data can be leveraged by each of the apps. They can extend additional apps. The apps can actually create additional data in terms of collecting additional data from the business users or your end users. And then that is also centralized so that it helps you in terms of overall productivity and improving this. Okay. I'm going to skip some of this. I'm going to go through one last demo, and then I'm happy to stay and do additional questions, so in the interest of time. So this is more talking much more in-depth about common data service, but the gist of it is primarily it's primarily to help you to centralize all of the data into one single location, so that all of your business processes are generating all of the data into one single central location. Then your business apps and business users can actually leverage these data in much more seamless way, so that they don't have to go and understand each of the schemas and then go and do all the joins to understand, make sure it's much more seamless for the business users. So one of the other demos in terms of what we've done, I wanted to show this, is so you can, once an app is created in Power Apps, you can actually embed your Power Apps into your Power BI as well. So I don't know how many of you know about this, but you can actually embed your Power Apps directly into Power BI. So this is the demo, which is actually the app in terms of the list of devices. And then, for example, if I go and click on a specific device and then order it, now you will see that the total sales essentially will change. So this is essentially 2K. The last sale was 2K. This is essentially getting the real-time data so that like as and when people order, you can actually see what is the data which is coming in. Here we have embedded the Power Apps directly so that it makes it easier for people to browse and actually see this. But you can, this is just to illustrate that you can also embed Power Apps into Power BI if needed appropriately. Okay. I want to stop because we're out of time. So any questions? There are only a couple of more slides in terms of CDS, so overall. Yes?
Is the common data service replacing SQL or Excel, or so what kind of?
No, it's not intended for replacing any of them. So your data is stored in obviously SQL Server. If it's using it, definitely use SQL Server and everything. So what Common Data Service helps you is essentially centralizing all of the data. It understands each of the schemas natively. So if you're storing the data in Dynamics 365, underneath the covers, it's already using a Common Data Service. Okay, so if you're creating a new Power Apps application and where you're going to gather and collect data, we recommend that you create a connection to Common Data Service and use the Common Data Service, because by default, Common Data Service, it comes with a set of schemas. You can use those schemas and extend it or customize it for your company based on your needs, and then leverage that Common Data Service, and then you can enter all of the data into one central location.